Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
You know, in a sensible system of government, everybody ought to be free to ask, what's the right thing to do here? Instead, we've got this crazy world where teachers are told never to put an arm around a crying child, and playgrounds are not allowed to have things that are fun for kids, and businesses don't give job references, and all these things where people are paralyzed in all kinds of ways that make no sense.
Coming up on Dialogue, a lawyer who believes America's legal system is strangling what's best about our country. A conversation with author Philip Howard next on Dialogue. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. Americans of all political stripes hold up the concept of the rule of law as one of our country's crowning achievements. But what if the rules of law, so to speak, are actually working against our best interests? That's the contention of my guest today. Philip Howard is an attorney and the author of books about legal reform, including The Rule of Nobody, The Death of Common Sense, and Life Without Lawyers. Mr. Howard's opinion pieces have been published in major newspapers such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. In 2002, he formed a coalition called The Common Good, whose mission is to, quote, overhaul governmental and legal systems to allow people to make sensible choices. Mr. Howard's TED Talk on the subject has been viewed more than 500,000 times. Now he's in Boise to address the Bench Bar Conference organized by the federal court system in Idaho, and I'm pleased to have him join me in the Dialogue studio. Welcome.
Nice to be with you, Marcia.
It's nice to have you here. Well, I'm going to jump right in and quote you, back to you. You have said, at this point, American democracy is basically being run by dead people.
Well, it is. So we have in the federal government this accretion of laws and regulations, mainly since World War II. So many programs that the federal government doesn't have a count for them. They haven't kept it, but it's probably about 10,000 discrete programs. And no one ever goes back and fixes them or changes them for new priorities or unintended consequences. And they dictate how people spend their days, how the government spends its money and such, and they just sail on towards immortality. I'll give an example. Environmental review was supposed to take months and be no more than 150 pages long. Typically, in a big project today, the review can take a decade with documents that are 10 to 20,000 pages long. And it's actually bad for the environment because it prolongs bottlenecks and such. But no one goes back and fixes it.
So the dead people are the people that actually put these laws in place.
Yes, and wrote the regulations and then never went back. And the live people never go back and say, hey, this wasn't what we intended.
Well, and it's not just the laws, it's the rules, it's the regulations
Yes.
that go along with the laws.
Right,
so,
both.
And originally, many of these rules and laws were put into place for regularity, for uniformity, to make things easier, to make things the same. Your contention is that in doing so, it has actually caused more issues and more favoritism in the end.
Yeah. So I think the fight over big government versus small government is to a great extent in the wrong direction. That the growing interdependence of society will only increase the demand for government services. You know, to protect clean air and water, to make sure the toys don't have lead paint on them, to safeguard against terrorists, all that. So as the world gets more closely connected, we're going to need government oversight. But we've created this regulatory system that not only provides programs to achieve those and the goals, but actually has rule books that can be 1,000 pages long that purport to tell people exactly how to achieve them. And it just doesn't work. It's like central planning.
But you are not, as you say, you're not trying to throw laws and all these regulations out. You're not.
No, not at all. And so, no, we're trying to make the ones that make sense work better. An example, Australia years ago had problems with its nursing homes. America has terrible nursing homes, and most states have about 1,000 rules. Food should be stored not less than 15 centimeters above the floor. It's just very detailed things, and the nurses' aides and nurses go through the day with a checklist trying to comply with all these rules. Well, studies have shown that it actually diverts attention from what's really important, which is making life nice for the people in the nursing homes. Well, Australia had the same problem. They scrapped their entire rule book and replaced them with 31 general principles. Have a home-like setting, respect the dignity of the residents, serve nutritious meals. The regulators didn't give up their authority, but now there would be an argument if there was I don't think this is a home-like setting. And they'd be arguing about right and wrong, not whether you complied with Rule 526. Within a year, the nursing homes in Australia were twice as good.
So each nursing home could decide, this is what we feel is a home-like environment for our guests, and do it rather than going by a specific
rather
rule
than
book.
rules. And so you had nursing homes that were very different from each other, but they still had to answer to being a nice place to live to the regulators. But they could do it in their own way.
So-called motherhood principles or whatever.
Yeah.
So you would favor more principle-based
Yes.
regulation that gives people a freedom to decide what works for their particular entity. Now, I'm sure that people pushing back on that would say we have to have certain regulations, say in food safety and other places, because if we don't have them, not everybody is skilled enough to know, how hot the food should be or how cold it should be, or, in a nursing home setting, what really is safe. So we need to write these things down.
Well, regulation, like all life choices, is complicated. And so what you want to do is have a system that works. There are places where rules are appropriate, speed limits or effluent limits for pollution and things like that. But even, say, with effluent limits for pollution, sometimes it'll be better for the environment if you actually violate those someplace else and spend all the energy in another place. So during the Clinton-Gore Reinventing Government program, which I worked on, we actually came up with a program that would allow waivers from rigid guidelines if the effect was to better serve the environment. In Utah, they have a social service agency for child welfare. Child welfare is very complicated, in troubled homes and such. It's really hard to deal with. Each one's very different from each other. They have guidelines and rules, but they actually have a system that allows the social workers to deviate from the rules if they think it's better for the child. But the requirement is that the social worker then write a report explaining why they deviated, and the effect is their rules constantly evolve, and people are doing the right thing. But in my world, in a sensible system of government, everybody ought to be free to ask, what's the right thing to do here? Instead, we've got this crazy world where teachers are told never to put an arm around a crying child, and playgrounds are not allowed to have things that are fun for kids, and businesses don't give job references, and all these things where people are paralyzed in all kinds of ways that make no sense because of the detailed rules.
Because in some instances they're afraid of lawsuits.
And
too.
also because they're scared of lawsuits. And that's also a problem of authority, because the judges don't actually draw the line about what's a reasonable claim and what isn't. They let people through for anything.
And we'll get to that in a moment. Do you consider yourself a libertarian?
No, not at all. I think there's a really important role for government oversight. But the standard for government should be, is it enhancing the freedom of citizens to, live lives? So yes, to having clean air and water enhances our freedom. We don't have to worry about whether we're going to get poisoned when we drink a glass of water. And that's the role of law generally. It should set boundaries and safety nets so that we can go through life focusing on doing what's important to us without worrying about, taking care of, without being defensive all day long. But instead, it's become this mind-numbing kind of bureaucratic monster where a lot of people spend all their time complying with it, not moving forward.
We'll talk about your potential solutions in a moment. Where did this hit for you? Where and when did this first start hitting for you, your frustration with the accretion of laws and rules and
Well, I mean, if you're a lawyer and you sort of have a client with a legal problem, you go look at the rule books, and which I don't really encourage anybody to do because they're so boring. But you look at them, you say, why are they telling me that eggs shall be cooked in a rule? You know, how much can you have soft-boiled eggs? I mean,
because people can get salmonella.
Yeah, sure, but you could have a general principle that says, you know, food shall be served safely, and then there are guidelines for safe food. You don't, the Workers' Safety Agency, OSHA, has 4,000 rules. And people spend all their time complying with the rules, and there have been studies that show that the rules don't improve safety. What improves safety is actually a culture of safety and training and preventing turnover among workers. So people, you know, and all these little, all these specific guidelines.
So working with your clients, you came across
working with clients, I came across what I thought were kind of idiotic rules. But then I was active as a civic leader and in New York City, and was involved in many land use and other landmark, Save Grand Central, things like that.
Right.
And I had a lot of friends in government. And increasingly, they told me they weren't able to do what they thought made sense. And I said, well, why can't the person who's the executive director of the City Planning Commission make judgments that make sense to this person? And that led me to just thinking about the nature of authority and public choice and such. And I ended up writing I didn't set out to write a book, but I ended up writing a book called The Death of Common Sense. And much to my wife's surprise, it became this huge, at my surprise, it became this huge bestseller, like one of the big bestsellers of the year. And then all of a sudden, I was thrown onto the national stage and advising Clinton and Gore and Bob Dole and all kinds of other people. And, you know, but it all came out of just being a citizen and being a civic leader and wondering why we couldn't make sense of public choices.
So back to you being an attorney and having clients who are frustrated
Right.
with these rules. Some could say that you want to do away with these rules because it simply helps your clients, and you know that there's a personal.
Well, actually, my practice was as a appellate litigator, so I wasn't doing regulatory practice. So I came across the rules while doing litigations over something, but I wasn't actually practicing trying to help clients get around this. I was just resolving past disputes, and I'm no longer practicing law anyway. So I'm, you know, I've increasingly done this as an avocation, not as a job, over the last 20 years.
But do you see reducing regulations as benefiting, say, corporate interests? You know, some people may look at it and say, "Oh, this is an attorney who wants to get rid of rules because
Right.
it helps the moneyed interests be able to do what they want without safeguarding those who don't."
You know, I don't think anybody who knows me or has been involved in our projects would think that. No. I mean, our board includes people like Bill Bradley, and George McGovern was a founding member of the Common Good Board. And so we have a lot of liberals. Our funders include big liberal foundations like the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Our partners are people like the Harvard School of Public Health, not known for their conservative views. So you know, I pretty much hate both parties, and I think there are as many corporate and business abuses of the current regulatory system as there are, you know, kind of liberal or union abuses. I mean, everyone's gaming the system at this point, and what's not happening is sensible, balanced decisions all day long. So no, I'm not for getting rid of regulation. I'm for making it work better.
Is some of the, in your view, overregulation and you know, multiplicity of laws due to the fact that we want a society that doesn't have much risk in it, where we know what's going to happen at any given time, and people don't really want to take responsibility for making tough decisions?
Yes, in general, the current system of government in our country, no one designed or intended to design. It's a series of discrete legislative and regulatory compromises that have been piled on top of each other over the years. We have 82 separate teacher training programs, 80 programs for transportation for the poor, 21 financial literacy programs. It's completely nonsensical. It's a junk pile of good intentions. Most of the programs are things we probably need in a society, but they need to be coordinated and not, and not wasted. But you put your finger on something that's really important, which is there's an instinct of humans to want to control other humans. They don't want to have the risk of somebody else's choice. We're always nervous about our boss. Are we, are we going to keep our job? It's just, it's just in the nature of who we are. So people like the idea, but what if that environmental official is going to let the polluter just pour it into the river? We better have very specific rules and stuff. And as I argue in my books, that's ultimately counterproductive. When you have so many rules that nobody can use their judgment, it ends up hurting the environment because you can't make the choices needed. And the reality is you can put where our focus of mistrust ought to be is in having checks and balances against the occasional jerk, who does the wrong thing, but not preventing all the people who want to do the right thing from doing what's right.
Well, let's talk about some of your proposed solutions. You have, is it 5 proposed constitutional amendments?
Right.
Bill of Responsibilities, you call them?
Yeah, there's a Bill of Responsibilities. Well, one of the things I argue in the Rule of Nobody is that we've disempowered, in a variety of ways, the people who ought to have the authority. The president can't, in the 2009 stimulus plan, the president didn't have the authority to say go to all these infrastructure projects. So we had $800 billion, a third of which was supposed to go to infrastructure. They ended up spending 3.6% on transportation infrastructure because the president, duly elected by a majority, couldn't do what FDR did 70 years ago, which is just get to work and start building. And these weren't roads through virgin forest. They're just rebuilding what's broken. So yes, I think the president and Congress, everybody needs to pull away some legal clutter and have more authority. So I would give one of the amendments gives the president, more authority both over personnel, and over the regulatory, sort of writing. Another would require Congress to actually look at old laws, that they would sunset periodically, and an independent committee, they couldn't reenact them until they got a report from an independent commission, which actually explained to the public, what this law was doing. That's what Germany has. Germany has an independent commission of retirees. Before any laws pass, they give a report so that the public can actually see what's going on.
And you would also give judges a stronger role in being able to dismiss lawsuits that were frivolous in their view.
Yeah, again, this is one of those debates that I think is entirely in the wrong dimension. The quote, tort reformers want to get rid of people's ability to sue. I don't want to get rid of people's ability to sue, but lawsuits are an act of state power. It's just like indicting somebody, you're indicting them for money. So it's important to have gatekeepers to make sure that the claims are reasonable according to established social norms. Otherwise, they don't enhance our freedom, they undermine our freedom.
But isn't that what judges already, they can already
No, they
throw
don't.
out frivolous lawsuits?
Judges are told that to act like neutral referees, that just do the process. And sure, if it's really crazy, they'll dismiss it. But let's say somebody has an accident and they sue for $10 million. Well, you wouldn't let a prosecutor seek the death penalty for a misdemeanor. So why do you let some self-interested person bring a lawsuit for $10 million because they broke a leg?
Now, some have pointed to this suggestion of yours, this solution, and said he wants to do away with jury trials. He wants to vest more power in judges and do away with jury trials, which, again, would help a certain clientele. Well,
the Constitution, our Constitution, in the 7th Amendment, says that the jury trials shall be preserved, and no facts decided by a jury shall be, disputed facts shall be overturned except in accordance with both law. But even under that amendment, there's a distinction between what's a ruling of law and what's a ruling of disputed fact. And what I'm arguing is that judges have a vital role in a free society of drawing lines as a matter of law of what's a reasonable risk. If somebody goes swimming in a public park and they drown, or they have an accident and they sue, and the park didn't do anything, there was no hidden hazard, it was an accident. If you let that person sue, no matter what happens in the lawsuit, the effect of it will be that people will close down the public park all around. And that's what's happened in America. That's why we don't have seesaws and jungle gyms and big around. So people are scared. The schools ban running at recess in some places, it's like the madness. So judges have to actually say, and I cite authorities for this, judges have to actually say, I've looked at the briefing as a matter of law. If I don't dismiss this claim, people in the state of Idaho will not be free to go swimming in parks anymore. And we have to, as a matter of law, protect those. So, yeah, I think that there needs to be a gatekeeper.
How much of, you have these proposed amendments. This
Right.
is a huge process. I mean, you've talked about America needing basically an intervention,
Right.
Like a rehab.
Right.
When you look at just even one of these sunsetting laws, mandatory sunsetting of laws with a
Right.
budgetary impact, how you go up against vested interests? Is this tilting at windmills? Are you too idealistic to try and unravel the system?
Well, first of all, the current system is not sustainable. You can't treat law like it's the Roach Motel, where everybody checks in. New laws check in, they never check out. You actually have to set new priorities. You can't spend $15 billion a year on New Deal era farm subsidies and have 10,000 other programs like that and be able to afford modern needs, early education for children, stuff like that. So the system is not sustainable. Secondly, and I go through this in the books, history shows that periodically, in this country it's typically about every 30 or 40 years, there's a dramatic change in the social frame of reference. In the 1960s, we woke up to all these abuses, pollution, racism, gender discrimination, lies about the Vietnam War, and we changed the way we did things. We changed our values and we changed the structures. Some of the problems that I'm talking about are the unintended consequences of some of those changes. So we need to fix those. And it's just a natural process that all societies go through.
Can it be done, though? There's so many vested interests involved in, each one of these laws that has a budgetary impact, and they come clamoring at the door of lawmakers.
Yeah, Washington is hopeless. Washington will never do it. So history shows it always happens in a time of crisis. And what we're doing at Common Good, we have a proposal now on streamlining infrastructure approvals, is we come up for very simple models that would allow specific things to work. We're putting them on the shelf like Happy Meal 1, Happy Meal 2, that sort of thing. And we build coalitions behind them, which are by and large include, not everybody, because special interests hate what we're doing. Everything we do has a special interest that hates us. One way or another. We're taking money away from corporate, whatever. But we're putting these on the shelf, and they get attention. Presidential candidates are talking about some of our proposals. I mean, it's not. And the first role in making change is to change the public narrative, to get your, people who are watching this program interested in these things and putting pressure on your senators and congressmen to begin to talk this way and think this way.
If you give an official, if you give a judge these additional powers, isn't that setting up a system where people can just co-opt that individual, where, there's so much power vested in one?
Well, government has power, that's right. I mean, what if that person is co-opted, and what if that person's on the take, and all of that? And that logic, if you take it, leads us to the current system, which is paralysis, systems that get gamed, and nobody can ever do anything. And so the answer is that democracy is a contact sport. It's supposed to be a contact sport where people argue over zoning applications and everything else. People, if the official is doing a lousy job or he's mean-spirited, then he ought to be answerable up the line, ultimately politically, to other officials. That's the way it has to work. You can't create a system of automatic government that guarantees correctness. And the great problem with our current system of government is that's what we've tried to do. And as a result, we have literally billions of words of law that have people tied in knots, wasting money and unable to rebuild a greener infrastructure because of environmental law review goes on so long. So law can't save us from ourselves. We need a system where we each can wake up in the morning and say, this is what I think is right, and go forward and, and fight with people we think are doing it the wrong way. But government requires choices. We've created a system designed to paralyze those choices. And justice doesn't work unless people can act on, do what they think is right. It just doesn't work. Justice is not just complying with rules. It's fairness, as Aristotle argued, always depends on the circumstances. So that's part of my message.
I do need to ask you, with these increased powers that you'd like to see for the executive branch, for the judiciary, people look at post 9/11, the landscape, and worry that already government, the executive branch, for instance, has too many powers to spy, to record information, to hold people against their will.
Yes, absolutely. And so there should be a fight all the time about how far government can go, and we should be fighting over that, and we should be changing the laws to say we don't want government to do these, or these are the principles. But government is, at the same time, government does too much sometimes and is abusive in some ways and abuses its power. In other ways, it can't do the most obvious things, like fix the broken bridge. So if you go back to a system that's much simpler, that's based on human responsibility, then there's much more room for the argument of right and wrong. And in my world, that's where democracy ought to land all the time. It's an argument about right and wrong, voting but based on what people think is right and wrong, and whether somebody's practical or not. And then let's have those fights and make sure government doesn't overstep its bounds.
So citizens need to get more involved.
Absolutely. But in my world, citizens will get more involved because it'll matter who we elect. Today, who does it matter who's in Congress? Nothing ever changes.
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing your views with us. Enjoy your stay in Idaho.
Great. It's great to be here.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. You've been listening to Philip Howard, an attorney and the author of several books about his views on legal reform, including The Rule of Nobody and The Death of Common Sense. For more information or to watch this program again, check out the Dialogue website. Just go to idahoptv.org and click on Dialogue. For Dialogue, I'm Marcia Franklin. Thanks for tuning in.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, become a friend on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.